All right. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me here today. My name is Amanda Klingler, and I am an executive team member of Disabled in Higher Education. And I'm here today to moderate this panel discussion on women and disability for Disabled Empowerment in Higher Education Month 2021. And so to kick off the panel, I'm first going to have the panelists introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about their current positions, starting with Dr. Dunlap.
I'm Aimee Dunlap. I'm an associate professor of biology at the University of Missouri, St. Louis. I do research on the ecology and evolution of animal decision-making and learning, and I work primarily with bees and flies. So I teach 40% of the time, research 40% of the time, and service 20% of the time. And I have a number of grad students to keep up with. So.
Great, thanks. How about Dr. Garrison?
Hi, I'm Mason Garrison. I'm just starting my third year as an assistant professor of quantitative psychology at Wake Forest University. No one knows what a quantitative psychologist is, so I'm going to tell you all. I effectively apply fun stats questions to psychological data. And for me personally, I tend to work with genetically informed design, so twins, cousins, full siblings, you name it, I'll play with it. And yeah, I have a whole lab full of undergrads and a couple of grad students, and it keeps me busy. And I'm also 40-40-20 in terms of teaching research load, but I feel like it's 100% teaching, 100% research, and maybe 50% service. So I think I covered all the things.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much. Zemen, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hello, everybody. I'm Zemen. I'm Zemen Berhe, and my pronouns are she, her. I'm currently a PhD student at the University of Massachusetts at Dartmouth, studying the phototoxicity of porphyrins under Dr. Emmanuel Ojadi. I'm also the founder of Black in Swimming and the current chair of the New England section Younger Chemist Committee. I'm very excited to be in this panel today.
Thanks. Last but certainly not least, Callie.
Hi, I am Callie Mahrer. I am a first-year baby PhD student in clinical and translational sciences at the University of Arizona. I don't have an official lab home yet, still hunting around. I have a pseudo lab home in a lab that primarily works on opioid receptors, which is interesting because I'm primarily a vascular biologist by training with like some stints in nephrology here and there. So I'm way out of my comfort zone, but we'll see how it goes, and yeah.
Great. Well, it's so nice to see you all, and I appreciate you all joining us here today for this discussion. So to ask our first real question, I suppose, just if you could each tell us a little bit about your journey through higher education and kind of how you got to your current position, maybe any barriers you faced. I'd really love to hear about that. And I'm just going to keep going in the same order, just because that's the order y'all are in on my screen. So starting with Dr. Dunlap.
Okay, so I have a number of chronic illnesses, which started when I was in high school. Although I didn't consider myself disabled, there were definitely issues. And what has happened parallel to my journey through academia has been an accumulation of more illnesses and the problems that those cause. So, you know, undergrad, some years were okay and some years were incredibly hard. I started a master's program with some field work, which turned out to be quite difficult for me. Wasn't sure quite why. Then I found out that I have a dysautonomia that was causing my heart to stop. So when I passed out, I was having near-death experiences, but I didn't know it. And of course, once you know something like that, a lot of things are clear. I worked in pharmaceuticals for a short amount of time because academia seemed very stressful. I was like, well, let's try this making a bunch of money thing. It was also stressful, and I missed the flexibility and independence of the work. I started a PhD program, and things were great in the first year or so. And then I got incredibly sick. I was in the hospital for a month. I spent many months on bed rest. My doctors were arguing about what was wrong with me. That was really tough, really tough. I lost my entire dissertation, 3 years of work. I had to restart. But I had a very supportive advisor. He didn't know what I was going through, but he tried his best. And I was in a very supportive department. Got a postdoc that was limited based on my health insurance situation, where I could go. Then I was diagnosed with MS, with multiple sclerosis, which explained a lot of what was going on. I started on medicine, which completely wrecked everything. I couldn't, very, very ill. And at that point, I became very secretive about my problems, because you don't want to talk about a neurodegenerative illness when you are in academia. It's somehow not really cool to have something that's attacking your brain. A few chosen people knew. I went on the job market, closely kept secret. Tenure track, somebody divulged my information. That made things kind of complicated. Got tenure, got breast cancer twice. The treatment for the breast cancer triggered another autoimmune illness. So here we are. I'm not gonna lie, it's been really hard. However, finding the supportive people along the way, whether they were where I was or not, got to be really, really crucial. So I think I'm kind of lucky in some of these people that I was able to connect with, but also it's not been easy.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. And you bring up a great point about the stigma of different kinds of illness, especially in our field, right? It's that the idea that you definitely don't want to share that you have some kind of neurological thing in a field where people primarily value you for your brain, right? It's there's an increased stigma that comes with that. Yeah. So Dr. Garrison, would you like to share your journey?
So it's kind of funny that, or not funny, haha, but like it doesn't surprise me that you also were concerned about, being outed effectively. I've also been really, really closeted about the specific label. Like, I'm not even going to give it here because I'm in psychology, and although mine is neurodevelopmental, it's got a lot of stigma. Not all intentional, but it's there. I'm out in my department to 2 people, and one is my department chair, and he's been lovely to the point where I've told him he's been doing too much. Like, for me personally, like teaching in the morning is helpful. So he like made that happen, even though it was very challenging. Didn't have to be exactly at that specific time. Any time in that window would have been fun. So I've been very blessed in having supportive people who like are understanding. Like, I'm out to my department about having a disability. I just don't tell them the specifics, and they believe me, which is really nice. And like, trust when I say I can't do that thing, or I think this would be better for someone else to do. But it took a long time to get there. I started undergrad and took 5 years to finish because I just was dealing with life, and I cutesily call it being a hot mess. And I was grateful to stumble into a lab that did quantitative work in my 4th year of college. And so I was able to kind of get a diagnosis and get some treatment so that I could function, and just do that. And I went straight from undergrad at WashU to Vanderbilt in their quantitative methods PhD. And I think I was able to do that because there's a shortage of people that do stats and psychology. So they kind of they didn't have to, but I think there was more willingness because my advisor doesn't know the exact label. He knows that I have challenges, and like he works with me on those. He's very, very supportive. And like, again, I have this theme of gratitude because I know I'm lucky. I haven't faced a lot of barriers. If anything, my department chair like nudged me to, like, instead of buying something myself, these cutesy little finger grip things for writing implements, instead of just buying them myself, because I mean, they're cheap in to have the department pay for them and not use my startup funds. And he's like, you don't have to buy them that way. Why don't we have the department do that? And so that's been lovely, just having those things. And that's like, he was doing that before I came out to him. I know I'm using this language of like coming out of the closet, but that's kind of how it is, because being an academic where something is not perfect, that you aren't a full formed human, or not even that, sorry, that sounded awful, but like that you're not perfect, that you're not performing at 125% all the time is pretty rough to like be like, I have limitations, here's what they are. Psychology and other fields, they try, but I feel like there's a lot of stigma, and it just sucks. But I guess I'm getting myself sidetracked. Didn't finish up my PhD until after I got the job here. Pro tip, don't do that. Get your PhD done, because otherwise you'll cause a pandemic and have to defend remotely. So I apologize that this pandemic is entirely my fault. But just having a supportive department like help get me through this and like be accommodating and let me teach remotely. Like last year, this year, there's a little different story, but for the most part, I've been very lucky. I've been able to stay on track, not be too derailed. Everything has taken longer. Extra year of undergrad, extra year of PhD, and I will have an extra year of tenure track because of the pandemic. And that's okay. I think I'm okay with it, is what I should. Yeah, assuming I make it through intact. So I guess that's kind of my meandering story and how hopefully Wake Forest is my forever home.
Yeah, thanks so much for sharing. Yeah, it seems like a lot of the similar themes of like supportive allies being really important to that journey, and also like a fear of like the stigma that comes with, disclosing that, especially in an academic system where everybody likes to believe that they are superhuman and is capable of doing more than the average person. So like how do you feel when like you are disabled and like you're like, no, I have a limitation and I'm going to acknowledge it, right? Yeah, thank you. Zemen, would you like to share?
Sure. So for me, like I was born and raised in Germany, and I came to Massachusetts for college. And the reason why I was born and raised in Germany, because my parents were refugees, right? Coming from Ethiopia, fleeing a war. And actually my childhood was pretty normal, I would say. And I would, so it was pretty okay. And unfortunately, last year, another war started in Ethiopia. So it's reliving a trauma, basically. And it's the same area. Like I'm Tigrayan, that's my ethnicity. That is in northern Ethiopia. I'm not sure if you heard about this war or this genocide, how I call it. It's a crime to be an open Tigrayan in Ethiopia. So I have still a lot of family members, even though many of my family members now live in Germany and the United States. But I still have a lot in Tigray, Ethiopia. So it's really horrific and disturbing. And I don't want to share all of it because it's so bad and so sick, and it makes you kind of, I don't know, you question kind of humanity. And that started happening last year in November. So it's almost a year now. And so me and many other Tigrayans basically are traumatized, and we're dealing with trauma and PTSD and many other things. So that's where things changed for me. And actually, to be honest, I was happy that the pandemic happened, because it gave me I was not happy that it happened, but it kind of helped me. So I didn't have to go to places. I can just open up my computer and just deal with it this way. Because trauma kind of affects you as a person, and it kind of affects your schedule. You kind of see you're sometimes late for things. And I was never like that. I was always on time, and I try to be on time, but sometimes it's just so difficult, I guess. And yeah, so I mean, unfortunately today there was another airstrike. So if I just open up my phone, I just see all these images, and I'm in several group chats, and sometimes I just muted them because I just have enough, even though it's sad because, I mean, people are dying by starvation at this point because the Ethiopian government, you know, blocking humanitarian aid. I mean, it's that bad, you know? So yeah, so that's primarily what I'm dealing with. Before November 4th, I was, I don't want to say normal, but I didn't never identify with, oh, I never heard, oh, I was not, you know, thought about, oh, I was not really challenged with trauma or anything like that. So it was new for me. But I was happy that I got in contact with Sarita, one of the Disabled in Higher Education, I think co-founder. And yeah, she kind of introduced me to this organization, and I became kind of involved. But yeah, and they helped me. Yeah, and also my advisor, my current, yeah, I'm actually a PhD student at UMass Dartmouth, right? And he helped me because he's originally from Nigeria and he also was in war, so he could kind of relate to me. And yeah, he gave me good advice. But I mean, how can you explain a genocide and an ethnic cleansing? I mean, it's just it's just, you cannot explain it. Even if sometimes I tweet, if you look at my Twitter, it's a lot of Ethiopia and a lot of Tigray because that's what I'm dealing with. It's family stuff for me. So it's, I mean, I see some of my followers, they don't know how to deal with it. You know, it's so bad, you know, and I understand, but it kind of makes me sad when I see when people retweet and like things that are with no meaning. You know, when I tweet something funny, I get a lot of reaction and engagement. But when I tweet something about human rights, genocide, ethnic cleansing, rape, you don't really see much engagement. You know what I mean? So I question humanity, I mean, since last November, actually. And yeah, so for my end, it's mostly trauma and PTSD. And yeah, but I would say some people reached out, and I have to say a lot of strangers online. And a lot of my coworkers, I don't know about it because I don't want to stress them with it. They noticed that I'm more like focused on my studies, but I don't want to deal with, you know, like a lot of tension, all that. So I kind of keep it to myself. But since this is a panel discussion, I speak about it, but usually I don't want to, because it's heavy for other people too, you know. Yeah, so that's basically what I'm dealing with. And yeah, but I'm happy that I have a very supportive advisor. And yeah, but yeah, trauma really messes up with your life basically. And I hope once I have a great therapist, I can deal with it. But I think it will not happen if the war needs to stop. You know what I mean? You constantly think, oh my God, is my family member still alive? I mean, I don't know, because communication and electricity are blocked. So my family and many Tigrayans outside of Tigray, Ethiopia, we cannot even call, you know? That's what they're doing. And the funny thing is, I mean, it's not funny actually, it's just sarcastic, but the Ethiopian Prime Minister, he got the Nobel Peace Prize in 2019, which makes it, I don't know, it's really disturbing actually, and he's doing it. Well, yeah, so if you Google Tigray or Ethiopia, you will see it, but I warn you, most of the stuff is just so bad, and they're doing executions, dumping them into a river, neighboring country Sudan as fishing dead people out, and you cannot even recognize them because they were in the river for many, many days. Rape is being used as a weapon of war. I mean, that's what we're talking about. So it's very, very bad. And, you know, if you're just like looking from the outside, it's bad. But imagine if you have family members there and you don't know about them. So the constant fear, but yeah. So I hope the war ends and we can finally, Tigrayans worldwide can heal, because you will not find a Tigrayan that is in his right mind at this moment, I have to say. But yeah, enough about war. But yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Just want to kind of reiterate, like, I feel for you. And like, my grandma came over as a refugee, and it's not to like paint this kind of bummer picture, but it definitely still affects her. She's resilient, which I know is a double-edged sword with that phrasing. But I don't really, I wish I could hug you, because that must feel awful.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate. Yeah, it's a nightmare. I mean, I cannot sugarcoat around it. It's and I think they will label it genocide eventually, but it takes forever for them to act. And but I have to say, a lot of strangers, compared to so many of my co-workers, reached out, and I said, oh my God, that's true. Strangers usually, I was very surprised that happened. But I say it's very overwhelming. If you dwell too much into it, you just question humanity. It is what it is. But yeah, it's just sad that it's every generation, I mean, my family had to flee from Ethiopia because of a previous war. So I was born and raised in Germany. And then another generation is now fleeing, it's just repeating, and it's, So I actually, I don't want to be too pessimistic, but I don't actually think that Ethiopia as a country will survive. But that's just, maybe it's too bad, too negative, but I think that will happen. Because you can't have a war every generation. I mean, it's just so bad. But yeah, it's really unfortunate.
And have you been able to get like support from your program and like counseling and the things that you need, or do you feel like higher ed has maybe not been as accommodating as it could have been?
Well, I have to say my professor is very supportive. And I'm trying to, I will meet with someone next week, but I trust, like with those really sensitive information, about family, I only want to speak with people that I trust, you know what I mean? And I have to say that the Green community in Boston is very supportive. We have our events, we protest, we're doing a couple things, and the community is really stepping up. But a lot of people, if not all, are very just traumatized. It's just. But yeah, I guess I can do more. But sometimes I don't even sometimes have no energy to wake up. That's what it is. So, but yeah, I guess I have to reach out to maybe some other people that can support, but I guess I'm very happy that I have a really great supporter, advisor that is really helping where he can. And the good thing is in my department, we had renovations. So we were not allowed to be in lab for the past 8 months. That helped me a lot. So yeah, that helped.
But yeah, thank you so much for sharing that, Zemen. And that's, such an important thing to think about, is that like people are facing like different struggles completely outside of academia that are like compounding all the stuff that we are commonly dealing with as academics. And I really appreciate you sharing your story and sharing how it's affecting you, because I think it's so important that people like think about that and are aware of the things that are happening. So I guess now I'll give Callie an opportunity to share about your journey a little bit.
Awesome, thanks. Yeah, I've had a really difficult, mostly unsupported and very long journey through academia. This is my 12th year. So I spent 7 years in undergrad. That was a struggle in and of itself. Like I was a first gen student. I grew up in a home that, I wasn't even made to go to school. I didn't go to high school. My parents struggled with addiction, so it was pretty tumultuous for most of my life. So I just didn't have a support system. I didn't know anything about college, and I felt like when I started, I felt sort of overwhelmed, and I managed to sort of keep it together academically. But I didn't have any support system for any challenges that arose, and I was actually sexually assaulted as a sophomore, and I really struggled to sort of navigate my way through that. And I didn't really understand at the time that my disabilities made me more vulnerable. So I guess on that note, I should say that I have cerebral palsy and a nonverbal learning disability on top of several others. So yeah, I've struggled to not be as vulnerable as I can be sometimes, or not maybe end up in situations where people can be harmful, I guess is the best way I can put it. And it just made undergrad such a long journey. Like some days I just struggled so much and I couldn't even get out of bed, and I managed somehow to graduate, and I started an MS, and I moved to Yale, and I did work in a few labs, and I was assaulted again by a lab mate. So that was a setback, and I felt like it was a situation where I kept telling my PI that I was more vulnerable and I didn't know how to get out of the situations. And she just kept ignoring it. So it was sort of another setback and another set of struggles. And I didn't, originally ever really struggle with depression prior to these events or mental illness at all. And it's been really eye-opening because there's not as much support in academia as people think there are. Like my counseling center at the University of Arizona, it's not really a counseling center. It's designed to be like basically a crisis hotline, and then they refer you out. So, and there's a shortage of mental health care providers here. So if you start to struggle, like I am now, there's nobody to help you. And you just have to try to like hold your life together as much as possible, which I feel like sums up a lot of my experiences as a disabled person in academia. I mean, I feel like most of the time I don't have the financial resources or the sort of family or other support necessary to thrive. So every single decision I make is sort of based on how I perceive I'll get through the day at that moment. And it's been a bit of a mess. And I talk about it a lot on Twitter. So some of you have said, I'm not out to my department or I'm out to a few people. And I'm one of those people that, basically uses Twitter as an online diary. I mean, people know everything. I've even tagged you a few times because I don't want to hide these things, so that other people don't have to struggle as much as I have. And I would say the other sort of biggest obstacle that's linked in my journey is just trying to figure out how to approach lab environments, because things like nonverbal learning disabilities or autism can sort of mean that you interpret directions differently than other people would. And I would say if I had to think about the biggest obstacle that I face in labs, it's how people perceive those interactions and like things that I misinterpreted or something like that. I mean, I've literally lost jobs over like small little things, like just misunderstanding directions, and I have a million stories like that. And so it's been a really difficult journey. And I thought when I started my PhD, I would be in the clear. And I asked for closed captioning on on some lectures. And when I informed my PI that they were not up, I found myself without a lab the next morning. So yeah, the just sort of continual struggles we face and the sort of multifaceted nature of the intersection of a lot of different disabilities and the sort of struggles to just get by and get people to accept disability is very difficult. And I find that even now I tend to struggle more and more because there's no counseling. With grad student stipends, I mean, I take home $19K a year after taxes. You're just trying to afford co-pays for counseling or doctor's appointments or physical therapy, which I can't afford. And I have cerebral palsy, like I said. So it just, I guess long story short, has been a really, really long and difficult journey. And I really work sort of aggressively to try to get people to acknowledge disability in STEM spaces so that I hope the next person, I mean, even if I don't make it through, I hope that somebody else gets something out of this and they can maybe do what I was never going to be able to do.
I'm so sorry to hear about your experiences, Callie. They're unacceptable. But I will say you do excellent work as a disability advocate, and I think that you are making a difference. And I really appreciate you being here today, sharing your story with us. because it does matter. Yeah. So I guess to move on to the next question, how has the intersection of your identities as a disabled woman specifically shaped your experience in higher education? Starting with Dr. Dunlap.
Yeah, I guess my particular disabilities have shaped my entire existence and career. It's affected my chosen field of study because I have a lot of perceptual issues between a persistent migraine aura and optic neuritis and everything else. It's really drawn me towards looking at sensory systems of animals and how they experience the world. And I think living in different versions of my body has kind of done that. It's affected how I work. I'm very aware of the constraints of my time. I think some people in academia spend half their career figuring that out, but you know, when you have any sort of issues that put constraints on your time, like you're going to get really good at it and really good about knowing what's worth your time or not. That can be hard to figure out, but that shaped things. I can't do field work. I'm not going to be out there slogging through a field like all the other ecologists. They're vigorous people. I learned more mathematical modeling, some other things that I could do from my bed. That was a choice. I remember the meeting I had with my advisor where we literally mapped out a potential career for me. I was very lucky. Unlike Callie, my grad program had excellent health insurance. It may be terrible now, but I was able to see a health psychologist who was a professor at the medical school, who literally helped me plot out my career and rethink things. I wasn't always going to have to look through a microscope and feel like I was going to throw up after 10 minutes. I wasn't always going to be having to figure out how am I going to do bench work. I just had to get through the PhD and be good at training other people so that they would be doing it. That was a game changer for me because I didn't think anything could be possible. That was very lucky. Being a woman and disabled has completely, I think, affected the way I teach and the way I mentor. I build a lot of flexibility into my classes. There have been a number of disabled students in my lab. I don't know, I think experiencing the world in a different way than a lot of other people have, I think adds to our empathy for others. And this idea that you could look at somebody and you have no idea what's going on behind that smile. And I don't know, I try to use that like a superpower to make things as inclusive as possible. It limits what I can do. I'm very ambitious and I have good ideas. I literally can't do it. I think about the trajectory that my career could have been without all of this, and it would have been awesome. And it's taken me until recently to reconcile what I want to do and what I feel like I can do with what I am going to be able to do. And I'm in my mid 40s. It's taken this long. So yeah, there's a lot of things that shape who we are and how we think about our careers. But I can't say that there's been a single piece of my path from when I teach my classes to how I'm doing the grading to my meetings with grad students that isn't affected by these experiences that I have, the way I have to go through the world.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I think that's so important, right? That it's like that identity shapes like every part of your life, right? And like even like your scientific outlook, like it influences like the questions that you're interested in, right? And I think more researchers could do to critically examine why they ask the questions they ask, right? Thank you. Dr. Garrison, I'd like to go next.
Yeah, so I thought about this question as I was kind of filling this kind of form out to keep me on task. And it's the only one I had blank because for me, they're both so integral. I can't really envision what my life would have been like without them. Now, I didn't get like any useful diagnoses till later in life, but I struggled. And being female, is kind of well, it is who I am. I'm very also grateful that I don't have any question. Like I feel like I belong in my body. Because I imagine that must be incredibly challenging for others. But I also build in a lot of flexibility because as I was going through undergrad, if like faculty hadn't cut me slack, I mean, I hate to phrase it as cutting slack because I know that it's not, it's what you should do to, you know, make it so people can make it through, because why add that extra burden? But I think about that a lot when I teach, and like why I'm out at all, even vaguely. But for me, I guess like it's just who I am as a person, and I do think I did have made like different choices. So Aimee, you were mentioning how you compared the hypothetical you, undisabled you versus who you actually are, and how those trajectories are different. And I don't think I have that as much as that kind of like discrepancy in my mind, but I definitely chose to work at a place like Wake Forest because I knew I could do all the things I needed to do and be relatively successful, however successful that is in the midst of a pandemic. I can't imagine doing an R01 or doing an R1 type job. And like that was very clear. I had a supportive faculty who supported that goal. My advisor like pushed back when other faculty were like, hey, she could be doing more. I'm like, sure, but this is what she's going to do. And I guess maybe because I'm a woman there are fewer of us in quantitative psychology, maybe that kind of was just more, well, if we want women in the field, we have to do these things. So maybe it's extra accommodating. I don't really know. But what I try and do is at least be flexible and document all of my lab stuff for similar challenges that Callie has had, where you have implicit assumptions about what lab documentation is. I'm actively working on building a lab handbook that spells out like what clear expectations are, because it shouldn't be the case that students are struggling to figure out what they're supposed to do so that they can't do the science. Like the lab handbook should be there to help everyone, and like not making assumptions is really important. And also just being representative. Let's see, Aimee, you mentioned that you have a lot of disabled students in your lab. I also have a lot of them, and I think it's more than half. Now, whether they're publicly out or not, because I realized I kind of implicitly just outed a generic proportion. It's like that representation matters, and hopefully, Callie, your lab, your forever lab, will be supportive, and I'll send you an email after talking about buckets of NIH funding that make you cheaper for PIs, because I've learned that that is a thing.
Are they diversity supplements?
Yes.
Yeah, been there, done that. That's a whole story.
Okay. Well, just in case you were, so I'm glad to know that you're aware that that bucket at least exists. I guess those are my random thoughts about that unanswered question.
Yeah, thank you so much. Zemen, do you want to touch on how the intersection of your identities as a disabled woman has shaped your experience?
Sure. So for me, it started last year with the beginning of the war. But for me also as a Black woman, people sometimes don't believe you, especially if it's not a physical disability. They just say, oh, you just you don't even live in Tigray or Ethiopia, so get over it. They don't get it, So that's why it's very, very important to have allies. And for me, my allies are other disabled people. I mean, they understand usually. Also my professor who was a soldier, who was also in a war back when Nigeria was in a civil war. So he understands, but usually other people that, pre, let's say war last year, let's say October, I was, a complete different person, I would say. And people usually saw me as a strong Black woman, I think I'm still like that, but just with some challenges, I guess. But yeah, it's a fact that it's a non-physical disability that is hard for people to see, that some people struggle with other mental illnesses, and for me it's trauma. And but yeah, it's also the fact that usually, I know that the question is later, but they see when you're Black, you're not allowed to have mental illnesses or dealing with trauma. That's a big issue. So you need to be this productive human, and that's also a challenge that I have. And sometimes also from other Black people. So it's not just, it's for everybody. And, but yeah, like I said, again, supportive people are very important, that help you in this journey. And sometimes it's also just a stranger that will, give you advice maybe, or suggestions, and it's more understanding than people actually that are in your circle. They don't get it, or it's just so overwhelming for them. So don't even talk about those issues. I even stopped when I'm on campus. I don't even talk about it anymore, even with my professor, even though he's very supportive. But you cannot speak with those issues like on a regular basis, because you overwhelm them in a way. So I keep those conversations now for people that I want to talk with, you know what I mean? So a therapist is a good person, or psychiatrist or whatever, that are professionals, right? But I noticed from experience that if you speak even with people that love you and like you, but if you constantly speak about it, there's a time that they don't want to even engage with you, you know what I mean? So I learned that the hard way. And so yeah, that's my challenges. But I hope just well, I don't hope. I just hope that that the war there, or not there only, everywhere, in the Middle East and other, conflicts end, because it just destroys generations. It's another generations that are now refugees sitting somewhere in Libya, and it's horrific what's happening there to them. And they flee, they want to go to Europe, and a lot of boats drown, they don't know how to swim. So it's very horrible. But what helps me, maybe a positive note, I used to be this professional swimmer. I still am, but I don't go to competitions anymore. So I swim for myself. And yeah, so I decided to create a Black in Swimming Water Safety Matters organization. It's actually for everybody, but I want to emphasize Black people, because 73% of Black kids in the United States alone don't know how to swim. And there's a statistic from the CDC, 11 Americans drown in average a day. And a good friend of mine drowned this year in Hawaii. And she was the other Black chemist in my chemistry department. And I was a teacher. And she asked me, can you teach me how to swim? And she said, oh, I will do your hair in exchange. And we laughed and we had a great time. She was accepted into this Harvard astrophysics program. Unfortunately, she drowned. And her name is Naomi. She was also from, not Naomi, but she was from Nigeria and immigrated to the United States when she was a kid. So I decided I want to create this Black in Swimming Water Safety Matters organization to highlight not only Black swimmers, but to spread awareness for water safety, that as well. And that helped me, find purpose and help other people in that way. And but yeah, those are my challenges.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing and for doing that really important work to bring awareness to that. Callie, I know you're going to have to head off soon, so if you want to share your how your experience has been impacted by the intersection of your disabled and women identities, and then also if you wanted to offer any thoughts on unique challenges that we should draw attention to for disabled women and actions that allies can take.
Okay, yeah, I actually can stay a little bit longer, but I don't want to cut anybody off or miss out on anything. But yeah, so I love this question because disabled people in general, I think, are sort of labeled as just sort of poor conductors of self-advocacy. if we don't have what we need. And so people have this misconception that the ADA is, it almost seems like people think it's like a telephone number that you can call, or it's like a hotline, or it's, I mean, I don't know what people think happens when somebody says, no, you can't have lab accommodations, but you know, a lot of times it's nothing. And what people don't realize is most states have damage caps on damages for, like, you know, ADA violations. And so that means that you can't really, I mean, it's hard to hire an attorney pro bono anyway, but that's not nearly as common as people think it is. I mean, if you get lucky, you might get somebody to take a case on a retainer, but, you know, by that time, like, what are you actually accomplishing? And so most of the time what that means is if we don't get an accommodation, we have to make a decision, whether it's in class or in lab, whether to push it or let it go. And I made a decision earlier this semester to push it, and I ended up losing a spot in a lab. So, I mean, it comes with very real consequences. And I guess to connect this back to gender and to being a woman in STEM, and I imagine that this is a struggle for a lot of non-binary folks as well. So I don't want to just say that this is unique to just women, but I find that one of the biggest struggles I have is when I self-advocate, no matter how it's done or what the circumstances are, I'm just termed as aggressive or forward. This is something I got quite a bit, and it was incredible because I feel like it put me in danger because people wouldn't take the things I said seriously. And I tried to explain to my PI, the first PI I had at Yale, that, like, I was being sexually assaulted by a lab mate, and that I didn't know how to get away from him or what to do. And I found out it was a pattern, that he'd done this to every female member of the lab. And I was termed as, sort of aggressive for continuing to bring it up, or anytime I stood up for myself or I tried to advocate for accommodations that I needed, I was labeled just like difficult or not gentle enough, or and I think that's something that women and non-binary folks face often in STEM. So it's this double-edged sword, because people are like, well, if you're not getting accommodations, you just must not be self-advocating. And then you go to self-advocate and push and be like, no, I really need these things. Like, it's 2021. Why are you getting to say, like, I get to decide if you have these rights or not, and I get to decide if you, like, ask for them nicely enough? And it just, it's such a huge issue. And I feel like, I wonder what it would be like if I weren't a woman in STEM, if my aggressiveness would be labeled the same way. And I mean, the lab member that assaulted me wasn't labeled as aggressive ever. I mean, it didn't matter what he did. He didn't get the same labels. And then the sort of other issue that can be, I guess, statistically more gendered or more skewed would be sexual assault in labs or even in academic environments, right? So, like, I mean, we all hear all these horror stories about Title IX, and I mean, I watched Yale falsify my report, like, completely, and I got a bunch of messages from other women that said, it's really weird, they just, like, wrote something completely different than what I told them in their annual or quarterly report or whatever. And it wasn't an accident. I mean, it's a very systemic issue there. And there was no help. And I feel like a huge turning point for me, when I just sort of really struggled to come back from things, was like going into their EEO office and thinking that things were going to be okay, because, I had all of this evidence for my claims and things were going to be all right. And it didn't work out that way. And yeah, I think sexual harassment and sexual assault are huge issues in STEM. Matter of fact, I had to deal with it again when I applied to another grad program. I had a grad student in that program asking for nudes while I was applying. I posted how I didn't have, I'm not even kidding, how I didn't have money for rent or applications. And I got, I'm not even kidding, a message from a student in the program saying that that he'd like pay me for for pictures. So, which was really awkward because I was like, I have no idea how to get out of this. I guess I just block him because I don't know, what that means for my application. And I think I didn't understand because of my disabilities that I needed to sort of take certain steps to get out of that situation. And it just made it more awkward and vulnerable. And I relied on a PI to help me. And I'll never forget this. This was somebody that I trusted. And she said, you shouldn't tell me those things because then I'll be obligated to report them and like get the other person's side. And I had the DMs and everything. So I just sat there like, I guess I could produce them, but this is somebody that I trusted for years, that I considered one of the best mentors I'd ever had. And I felt like she'd always protected me. And to hear her be like, I'm not going to help you navigate this. And, even though I should already be reporting it, I'm not going to, and don't tell me about it, was just devastating. And I feel like it's, there's a lot of things going on, right? Like you rely on these people for support and they don't help you. And I mean, it just felt like another punch to the gut. And it just, one of the biggest sort of things that I feel like is taking me so long is that every time I feel like I gain an inch, I lose a mile. And just in that moment, I just felt like, I feel like every time I try to take a step forward, I get knocked back. And this was my mentor and the person that I probably trusted honestly most in the world. And to hear her say that was just, I didn't even know what to do. So I guess long story short, I think that sexual harassment, sexual assault, I think that gendered perceptions of conduct are all huge issues that women in STEM face.
Callie, I just want to express, like, I appreciate you sharing all of these things because it sucks. To put it bluntly, it sucks. And I hate that is your experience. And it's very clear that, frankly, I just want to commend you for persisting because that's amazing, because most people don't have to deal with that. And the fact that is your experience, valid, but it sucks. In the nicest way, you know what I'm trying to get at.
Thank you. Yeah, it does suck, but I hope that by talking about it, things get a little bit better. And I know someone was like, I don't understand why, you tweet something funny and people are like all over it. And, you tweet something really important that, might not be as like warm and fuzzy or like, there for entertainment purposes, obviously. And people just sort of stop listening. And I find that that's the case when I try to talk about sexual assault or sexual harassment, and people just stop listening, or unfollow or just don't want to hear it. And I hope that this gets through to somebody. I hope that somebody in their mentoring especially goes, yeah, I didn't think about like hidden assumptions, or I didn't think about how my conduct might be affecting my student. And it just, I can't change my trajectory. And I think I've reached this sort of rough acceptance phase of like, my life is not, I'm very afraid for my future for good reason, I think. And this isn't going to work out the way that I thought it was going to. But, I guess if my role in life is that somebody else has to climb one less ladder, then that has to be good enough.
Sexual assault bit is no joke. I mean, I was assaulted as an undergrad, and one of my first important research mentors harassed me and did a lot of awful stuff. And there's no recourse.
Yeah, I'm so sorry that happened with your mentor, because something that I talk about a lot is like the importance of mentors being like honest and being safe spaces. And I had, matter of fact, when I had an issue in this first lab that I was in this semester, I started late due to transcript issues. And, the PI was like, don't come into lab, like, stay out of lab until after you're done with this exam. And then when I questioned the accommodations, the next morning, she called my program director and she told him I just hadn't been showing up. So of course I sent him these emails and I was like, that's not accurate, as you can see here. And so, he said that when he asked her about it again and was like, it sounds like a misunderstanding, and tried to just sort of like reframe it, she was like, no, it's other things too. And, you know, I barely knew this person or communicated with her. So I'm like, I don't think it's an accident that I mentioned that, you know, your husband sort of accidentally violated FERPA and your lecture, or the lectures that you said were going to be captioned weren't. And I find myself without a lab. And what I don't think people realize in those moments, to sort of circle back to your point, is like, when you have a mentor, you, I think, at least trust them to be honest, right? So like if she didn't want to work with me, she could have just said that. And I think when a mentor like violates your trust, what it ends up doing is sort of traumatizing you all over again, and makes you feel like any space you step into is potentially unsafe. And so I like to emphasize as much as I can the importance of mentors taking responsibility for their actions and for their labs. And like if you make a mistake with accommodations or with a disabled student, owning up to it and just being like, you know what, I didn't know about this, I made a mistake, or I didn't know I was supporting you, I made a mistake, or I don't know how to support you, how can I do better? And I think something that's really common is having advisors blame students for things that we're not necessarily responsible for. And yeah, it's a huge issue. So I'm so sorry that you had to face that with a mentor, because that's heinous.
So as we come to the end of our session, just to quickly wrap up with our last few questions, I would love if in the last few minutes you all could just touch on how you feel that other identities that you have, such as race or class or LGBTQIA+ status, intersect with your disability and women identities, and then also what you feel that allies or disabled people of different gender identities can do to help support disabled women in higher education. And we'll start with Dr. Dunlap.
Yeah, I'm just a plain white lady who's disabled. So I can't really speak to that, other than that I've seen with students and colleagues that it's an awful lot harder. An awful lot more complicated. I think about what I wish my colleagues would know frequently, because it makes me cranky. I would like to say that I would like for them to stop being so frickin' ableist, but they don't even recognize what they're doing. So what I hope that people would take away is that other people are competent and they also work hard, even if you don't see it in front of you, and the vigorousness of somebody isn't necessarily connected to what they're capable of. And to give everybody a little bit more grace. You don't know what somebody's going through. You don't even know that they're experiencing that conversation in the way that you think you're experiencing that conversation. So across the board, it would be nice if people could be a little bit more kind and a little bit more flexible. My pet peeve with colleagues that I speak to is their insistence that every disability must come with paperwork, because we know that women are less likely to get their diagnoses for years. There's financial reasons that you're not getting diagnoses. There's intersectional reasons for not getting diagnoses. And you need to be able to accommodate people without the little sheet of paper that's telling you what you're forced to do in your class. And that makes me really cranky. So, and it is an uphill battle. I mean, as someone on the faculty who is dealing with this. So I had to whip out a cane to get across campus just a couple of days ago, and I felt like people were like wondering what was going on there. Most of the time I can keep things pretty invisible, but sometimes I got to walk holding onto a wall. Yeah, gosh, it's a long way to go. But if people are going to try to do their best, they need to assume that life for everybody else isn't like it is for them.
Wow, you just hit, sorry to cut you off, Amy. You literally hit like all the points that I wanted to make. And so like I have a department that is incredibly well-meaning and they try really, really hard. But I still had to teach my department chair what the ADA process was like. And I explained to him why I want, like, what the costs and benefits were for going through the formal accommodation process. Because for me to like demonstrate that I have a disability, that's neurodevelopmental, I have to have paperwork that doesn't exist. And like realistic, I mean, that's not happening. I mean, thankfully, I have a reasonable department chair, and so we're writing an internal memo that's be like, here's the deal. And we've spent, I don't know, ages on this thing, like weighing the pros and cons. I'm very grateful that I have that. And even him, I had to like explain to him why a policy was ableist. And like, thankfully, I trust him. Eric Stone, I told him about this thing. So like, he's wonderful. Like, so he deserves to be named because he is trying his darndest. But yeah, like even well-intended faculty, like they want that paperwork so that, you know, they can be like, okay, I'm following the rules. But knowing what that takes, that I would have to have my IQ test on file with a separate document, that's never going to be protected. I mean, maybe it is, but do I really want to be pre-tenure and have a document that says like I have a limitation and then be evaluated?
I can tell you from experience, no, you don't.
Yeah, that's my sense. It's like, I'm happy to be out that I exist in that scheme, but I really don't want to have my tenure portfolio also include this other thing, be like, she's amazing, and also she is clinically bad at many things that most people require. That's not going to go right. And like, so I guess my big message is allies need to not assume. I love it when I have colleagues that'll be like, hey, let's do a Zoom meeting because I know that you are managing your risk instead of everything being in person. Oh my goodness. And self-advocacy, I'm tired of it. I'm tired. I don't want to have to do it all the freaking time. It's exhausting. And I'm very privileged, so I can only imagine how people who have less support feel. Because if I'm just pooped, all of like, Callie, I don't know how you do it. I have so much respect for you. This is hard. So I guess my takeaway is it's so hard and people need to stop being assholes. Also to wear your damn mask. It'd be nice. So I guess those are my takeaway, that even with the most supportive environment, it's still really freaking hard. And just ask what people need. Don't assume.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. I think that's a great take-home message. Don't be an asshole. That's often, I use that tagline often talking about disability myself, because a lot of it just comes down to don't be an asshole. Let's have Callie answer. Well,
Yeah,
Zemen,
still, I don't see you guys.
Okay, so I guess have several intersecting identities. I am gay, which I don't usually say out loud. I'm usually pretty closeted just because of where I grew up. I'm always afraid to come out, but for the sake of this panel, and I am a first gen and obviously low socioeconomic status student. So I feel like the latter two are personally more impactful, but I'm also very much like female presenting, and my pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm not non-binary. So that comes with, I guess, like additional stigma that would come with those identities I don't have to face. So in that regard, I don't have to sort of deal with additional stigma. But even like I was telling somebody the other day, because of my disabilities, like dating is such a process because the pool's already a little thinner, and I don't have a lot of time. And my girlfriend's been really understanding, but it's something that I worry about all the time. I'm like, am I being a good partner? Because, I don't have as much time as I would like to have just to get by, right? Like I have multiple disabilities. And so there's physical constraints. People with cerebral palsy use like additional energy just existing. So I come home some days and I'm just exhausted. I'm exhausted physically and emotionally, and that's super hard. And I just that makes things difficult. being first gen has been hard because I don't have anybody to help me navigate things. Like if I encounter a barrier, and especially not having any money, like I live my entire life sort of day by day, minute by minute. And I always try to describe to able people, and I feel like this is something that I wish folks knew. I'm trying to be allies, is that like I'm always just a few short drops away from homelessness. And that's so emotionally taxing, like on top of all the other trauma and all the other disabilities. Like, you know, if I can't pay my rent, I just don't have anywhere to live. I don't have anybody to take care of me. So it's really scary. And I wish that sometimes I wish people tried harder to come up with solutions. Like I just look at people are like, we have X, Y, and Z rules, whether it's, I don't know, I guess in education it's syllabi or it's lab policies or it's, you know, whatever. Each time you like follow these rules to a T, I know it sounds like a great idea, but you're excluding students that already have to fight so hard for everything. And we don't have, like, I don't have the financial resources for counseling or for, you know, physical therapy. So I just have to like try to take it day by day. And sometimes it impacts like my course performance. And sometimes it just, you know, what I'm up against is that every single day, I just struggle with how I'm going to live. And I mean, I can't describe like how awful it is, or how sometimes I see all of these obstacles, just one after another. Like I want to help myself, right? I don't have the resources to do that or the support system to do that. And I can't describe how isolating that is. And so like, I guess on that note, and everybody else has kind of said this, like to consider a student's socioeconomic status and like what they're dealing with outside of the classroom, because for those of us that like don't have support, it's exhausting. And I get up in the morning and you know, sometimes we talk a lot about this in the disability community, and I'll just be like, why am I still here? Like it's such a struggle to stay alive that, like, you know, I wake up in the morning sometimes and I'm just like, why do it anymore? And I know that a lot of people in the community have felt that way. And so I guess I would encourage, whether it's instructors or PIs or administrators, to understand that like, well, they might get up in the morning and be like, you know, I hope I don't have a long day at work or something, you know, or I hope I get funded. I'm sitting there going like, I hope I can just make it through the day. Like my struggle is one of just trying to stay alive. And it's so taxing on top of everything else that I wish people understood that. And I guess there's this inherent assumption that if people understood that, we'd have an easier path forward. And maybe that's sort of fallacious reasoning, but I would hope that if people understood what it's like to live in a world that's not meant for you at all. Like I wake up in the morning and I'm like, I don't belong in this world by default. I would think that things would be better. People would be more compassionate. And I hope that someday through all of this struggle, that somebody else has a different path. Like I said, like, you know, I can't alter what's going to happen to me. I've reached this, like, you know, I think my program is sort of given up. I think, you know, my trajectory is set and I can't fix it. I don't have the means or the support or anything else to fix it. But I hope somebody else doesn't have to suffer this way, even if it just means access to counseling and doctors or just support systems. Like I wish people had that. And when I look at like some of the best sort of interactions I've had, it's people that don't just say like, I can't help you because I don't know how to help you. Like I have a faculty member at U of A now who like set up just like a stand-in coffee date. So instead of just being like, you know, I don't know how to help you with everything, she said like, I can help you with this piece right now. And her saying that instead of like, I don't know how to advise you, made me feel so much less alone and so supported in that one way. And I think sort of the last thing I would touch on that note is I've noticed that faculty get very frustrated with like unconventional students, or like this was something that Kaylin Sumagray had commented on the Major Tweak or the Minor Tweak Major Impact podcast. She was like, you know, every time something didn't work for you, she was like, I originally like took it personally and was like, I guess I just don't know how to help then. And like she said that a turning point sort of came for her when she acknowledge that that not everything is a personal attack, that if something doesn't work, it's just about figuring out like how you can help. And I really wish that people would do that instead of taking things personally and just being like, I guess I'm not helping you, so I'm just going to give up, because I feel like it places sort of disproportionate blame on minority students, and I feel like it's so isolating, right? I'm already struggling to like get out of bed in the morning and just like stay alive, and to have somebody be like, I don't know how to help you buy, is just like, you know, I don't even know what to say to that. But in those moments when somebody goes, you know, I may not be able to fix all of this, but like I can be there. That, I mean, that's, anybody's willing to do that, does so much for me and says so much to me. So that was my really long, sorry, rambling way of saying there are a lot of things I wish faculty would do, but I guess it's just be more compassionate, more understanding, and like, just don't hang us out to dry. We're already so alone.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are great points, Callie. Thanks so much. Zemen, you seem unfrozen now. So if you'd like to share your final thoughts with us.
Sure, absolutely. And I'm sorry for that. I don't know, my Wi-Fi is sometimes acting up, so I changed the room. But yeah, like I will keep it short. My takeaway message is just that people need to be, just be kind, right? And you don't know what a person is going through, even though from the outside it seems to be they seem to be perfect, right? And everything is, you know, seem to be working well, but you don't know what a person is really going through, especially if it's mentally or, you know, with trauma or other things. So so first, be kind. And the second is, if you see someone struggling and you can help, you know, if that sometimes it's just a conversation, sometimes it's, you know, offering, you know, maybe advice or suggestions, but it's all boils down to being kind, you know. And yeah, I guess that's the most takeaways from this conversation. And I'm very happy that I'm, you know, part of this panel conversation. I wouldn't imagine last year being in this conversation. You know, I never thought about, you know, being in conversation with disabled in higher education. I never thought about it, but, you know, now this year with all what's been happening or still going on, it's really unfortunate, but I hope better days will come. And yeah, but just be kind. That will help so many people around you.
Yeah, I think be kind is an excellent note to end on. So yeah, I'd like to thank all of you for taking the time to join me for this panel. I really loved engaging with you and hearing all of your unique experiences and perspectives. I want to thank you for your courage and your bravery and a lot of the things that you've shared with us today. Yeah, just thank you so much for being who you are and for persisting as disabled people in an institution that doesn't necessarily want us here. So thanks.